August the 15th, 1947, Independence Day for India.
After 1947, we can say that, okay, the British have left and the colonialism is supposed to have ended, but the story is not so rosy.
Something was left undone.
A subcontinent larger than the whole of Europe becomes two self-governing dominions.
I want to emphasize the fact that it was split up, it didn't just happen.
Over lunch and a few gin and tonics, he drew a line.
Independence has not yet brought them peace. Rejoicing turned quickly into horror and mourning.
It was the single biggest forced migration in recorded history.
And all of these regions are tied into one country by the faith of Mohammed.
It's a subcontinent. It's not a country. It's almost an entire continent of different peoples.
By its very nature, it is not just about unity. It is about creating a difference between yourself and the other.
And we fast forward 80 years. Now we have vast numbers who have almost taken those ideas wholesale.
Can Hindus and Muslims live peacefully together?
His history are, what do they mean by this?
On August 15, 1947, the British withdrew from the Indian subcontinent. In their final act as colonial administrators, they partitioned the region into two countries, India and Pakistan. The story of the subcontinent since then has largely been driven by these states' efforts to define themselves in the wake of this partition. My name is Zac Colah. I'm an independent journalist, and I've been studying this for the better part of the last 2 years.
If I look back at 1947 through the eyes of a little girl, and a very quiet little girl, believe it or not, I never used to talk. I look at it as a time in which there were events happening which were larger than events that human beings could actually alter. It is almost as though a preordained kind of a storm had taken over, and I felt that even as at that age. I felt that no single person could effect anything, that there was a kind of inevitable quality about what was happening. And that's sad when you think that this should have been a time of great joy, of throwing over the colonial yoke and becoming, an independent nation. But that seemed to be in the background. And what was in the foreground was immense suffering.
You have partition and independence occurring simultaneously. However, the ideology or nationalism or national identity that is formed after 1947, it is based on partition. It is not based on independence, because the independence was from the British. The subsequent understanding or formulation of what Pakistan or India or even Bangladesh later on became, that is something which is dominated by what happened, and we've kind of mentioned maybe earlier on, is about the violence, the conflict which happened in 1947. Partition becomes the most important, most significant, most momentous event in the modern history of South Asia. It's not independence. It is partition, as I said, even though they occur simultaneously.
I think that because neither nation state ever allowed the population the chance of closure, that they both kind of, drummed their drums and flew their flags and all the rest of it. And they never really, they spoke of the human suffering, but as a peripheral thing. And still there is that feeling that even in the fourth, fifth generation, that something was left undone. And I think what was left undone was giving the people the opportunity to really mourn, and then to give them, to bring themselves to embrace one another and say, we are sorry, in a collective way.
So the absurdity of it is captured particularly in Pakistan's official, in a sense, ideology of state, which claims that there were two nations in India, two being Muslim and Hindu, and that these two nations had always been separate. And on the basis of that perennial separateness, or forever being different and separate, Pakistan was a logical culmination. And that's quite absurd, because there were never just two nations.
We need to remember that South Asia has always been an incredibly diverse place. Not only are there more religions than Hindus and Muslims, there are Sikhs, there are Jains, there are Zoroastrians, there are Buddhists, there are Christians, but there's also tremendous diversity within each of these religions. In fact, the primary way in which people historically have defined themselves and organized themselves has been through the region or the language. So instead of being just Muslim or just Pakistani, you are Punjabi, you are Sindhi, you are Baloch, or you are Pakhtun. But that has proven very difficult for the state to grapple with.
States have a selective history, and they choose selective facts to suit their narratives. Whether in the case of Pakistan that all Muslims were the same, or in the case of India that somehow Indian society is free from all of these internal caste and class and ethnic divisions. And in that, when you glorify your own sort of state or your own so-called nation, there's always another. There's always someone who is not you. There is always someone who threatens you. There is always someone that in a sense represents the antithesis of you. And India and Pakistan states' narratives have done that with one another.
Pakistan kind of defines itself as a country that is not India. India defines itself as a country that is not Pakistan. The state's version of events, the discourse that it creates, the nationalism that it creates, that relies on simplicity, that relies on linearity, and it is something that people are supposed to accept. But the issue with that is that, again, if it is trying to bring about a unity which is artificially constructed, then it excludes everyone else who's not part of that particular group.
This is a really important point. If the borders of a state are defined arbitrarily, which they are in India and Pakistan's case, then any summation of identity under a single unitary national label is definitionally exclusionary to everyone who exists on the other side of that line.
Nationalism of the state talks about this binary of us and them, of people who are inside this artificially drawn line which defines the borders of a particular nation, and anyone who is outside of that, he or she is the outsider. So again, by its very nature, it is not just about unity, it is about creating a difference between yourself and the other.
We've seen a complete flattening out of the other. So all Pakistanis, if you're on the Indian side, are evil, and all Indians, if you're on the Pakistani side, are evil. And I think while that is the case with state nationalist narratives anywhere, that when you see the world like the state, or you only see it like the state wants you to see it, then inevitably you flatten things out and you create, I think, enemies out of an entire people. But beyond that, there's also, of course, lots of excesses that both of these states have committed within their own boundaries. So it's not even vis-a-vis just the other, if the other is viewed as across that dotted line, across the line where the territorial nation state is separated from the other, but also from internal others. In Pakistan's case, most notably, that would be non-Muslims. But it would also be anyone in Pakistan's case, I think prominently, who seeks to articulate their identity in something other than religious terms. So for instance, Bangladesh, or what was East Pakistan, was constituted largely of the Bengali ethnic group or ethnic linguistic group. And after 1947, Bengalis in Pakistan, who were of course Pakistanis, perceived themselves to be on the receiving end of a very inegalitarian and insular power structure, and demanded anything from speaking their own language freely and being made an official language to adequate representation in the state apparatus, and they never felt that those demands were heeded. And the Pakistani state at various points depicted them as traitors or anti-state elements, and of course that ultimately led to the secession of what was the eastern wing of Pakistan and the creation of Bangladesh. In India, despite the claims that all Indians are equal, for as long as I remember and long before I even existed, and since this India as a modern nation state in 1947 came into existence, regions like Kashmir, in the northeast, Manipur, Nagaland, Assam, have also faced similar forms of state repression.
I have to jump in here one more time because this gets at the crux of the issue. Not only does the creation of the nation state entail a sort of othering or exclusion of those who exist on the outside of the territorial border, but it also entails a sort of homogenization of the identities within.
A unitary identity cannot be successful either in India or in Pakistan. It will inevitably give rise to conflict because the objective basis for unity simply does not exist, because South Asia is very, very diverse. It's a subcontinent. It's not a country. It's almost an entire continent of different peoples with incredible histories that reach back thousands of years. And to bring these diverse groups of people together, these diverse communities together, you have to have a policy and understanding of the diverse nature of your society. The project of the Pakistani state can only be successful by first and foremost recognizing that Pakistan is a multinational society. And that would itself imply that Pakistan does not have one identity, but rests on a plurality of identities. This is precisely why Pakistan has found it so difficult to accept the idea that Pakistan is not a nation, but a multinational society. Precisely because the reason for creation of Pakistan was the concept of Muslim nationalism, that the Muslims of South Asia are a nation. But if the Muslims of South Asia are not a nation, but many different nations, then that itself puts this particular idea in contradiction with what we call the two-nation theory. So that is the contradiction at the heart of Pakistan, which I think creates the tension in which it is difficult for the Pakistani elites to recognize the fact that Pakistan is a multinational state.
So I guess the real crisis of identity is not of the people but of the state, and it's not simply narratives between states but within states. And that explains why the consequences of which are felt by the minority groups in both India and Pakistan, whether that be in Balochistan, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, in Indian Kashmir, or in Nagaland. These headlines that we see fundamentally derive their origins and contradictions from the idea of a single unitary national identity.
So, there's a series of there's a list that one could not, tick off one by one of internal others as well as the other country in toto. And ultimately, as I said, the burden of state nationalism is felt by those who are the most oppressed of all. And even those who aren't, and even those who ascribe to state nationalism, the ordinary Indian and Pakistani who takes on that narrative, I think in class terms, and I don't think a working class Indian or a Pakistani benefits from an arms race, benefits from, viewing the other as the enemy.
The right wing in India, I think most people can see today, feeds off of this narrative that anyone who is not loyal to India is somehow the other associated with Pakistan, and that Pakistan is behind the vast majority of the problems that exist within India. We see the exact mirror image of this in the context of Pakistan, which is that every problem in Pakistan is attributed to India, that if there is a problem in Balochistan, it must be because of India. If there was a problem in East Pakistan, it was purely caused by whatever India did and what Raw did and so on. And I think we have failed to look at, on both sides of the border, we have failed to understand or look at what policies we have made which have led to exacerbating the situation. And I think we failed to address many of these concerns because we've been scapegoating each other for the last 7-8 decades now.
Did there have been good times when we've had more rational leaders on both sides who've tried for a rapprochement? But armies are armies. The boys with the toys will never give up.
There can be progressive nationalisms, and there have been progressive nationalisms in the history of the subcontinent, but increasingly we see whatever progressive layers of those nationalisms being stripped away, and us being left with xenophobic projects where the underlying sort of failures of a system that does not meet the needs of most of its people are, in a sense, consigned to secondary importance, while the losers of the system themselves are propagating those hateful ideologies. And that is certainly a threat to all of us, a threat to the region, a threat to future generations, I think, who will ask us, what were we doing, bandying about these narratives of state when all of these very deep structural problems were playing out.
So what we find is holding back South Asia today is these states' efforts to define what it means to be Indian or Pakistani. While we can trace the origins back to the time of the British or the partition of India, we should also recognize that these narratives are built today and every day in which we passively accept the state's efforts to build a single unitary and exclusionary national identity. This is the story of what I see as one of the fundamental contradictions holding back South Asia. I hope to have articulated it well in this film, but it would be incomplete without addressing the broader context in which we exist.
That idea of decolonization became increasingly limited just to a flag, an aim, and some claims about the fact that we became free in 1947. I think is very much an unfinished project.
It is ironic that these countries say that they gained independence, but these countries do not see themselves as the opposite of Britain. They see themselves as the opposite of one another, which before 1947 were one country.
I see all three countries, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, in fact all 5 countries, Nepal and Sri Lanka included, as essentially being neo-colonial states, in the sense that these are societies and states that are dominated by more advanced capitalist countries. Their economies are dominated by more advanced capitalist countries, and I see them not necessarily as having really achieved economic sovereignty, but the form of colonialism has changed from direct colonialism to economic colonialism. And so, in my view, the struggle in the 21st century for India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka and Nepal will be for the economic sovereignty of our societies.
80 years after decolonization, most South Asians are living in countries which, despite their claims to the contrary, are still largely constituted by people who are deprived of fundamental economic freedoms, fundamental political freedoms. And as where we started, instead of thinking about all of these questions as a collectivity, are at each other's throats half of the time, because their states are preaching the virtues of enmity with the other.
These 5 countries need to recognize that they have a common interest. Their common interest is, in fact, to ensure the economic sovereignty of their societies. And that cannot be achieved if we are at loggerheads with each other, if we are spending more on our militaries and preparing for nuclear war with each other.
We don't have very much time, certainly, at least the working people of these countries, the people who are washed away by floods, or killed by excessive heat waves, or lynch mobs, or the drones and missiles when there are skirmishes on the border. We don't have very much time, but I certainly continue to believe that it is possible.
So yes, so the antidote is the poets, the music makers, the artists, the filmmakers who constantly strive to put us in touch with ourselves, the fact that we are human, and yes, we can be another kind of human being. So yes, they are the antidotes, they are the healers.
And are you hopeful?
Very hopeful.